Thank you, Honourable Speaker, sir, for the opportunity given unto me. Honourable Speaker, the motion that we are discussing in this August House is an important one. And I must commend the Honourable Kavakatora who introduced this motion, who is a person of notable achievement. While hailing from one of Namibia's hitherto marginalized communities, the Honourable Member beat the odds and went on to obtain academic qualifications from world-renowned tertiary institutions and crafted to himself a career in executive levels in corporate Namibia before he joined politics. He is, I think, in his third or fourth term as a member of the National Assembly, and considering his life's work, he is a qualified person to engage the important matter that he raised. He contends that real democratic systems are best able to enrich the entire society because they are driven by voters and voters' interests. If that does not happen, he contends, as is the case in Namibia, one is to be concerned, he says, and start probing why our democratic system does not deliver on the development goals of the electorate. Of course, as part of the motion, we are therefore called upon in this instance to examine the question of democracy and development and seek to establish the relationship between the two contemporary concepts. In it, as far as we are concerned, we must locate the question of nation building and state building so that those concepts are enriched by what happens in between them. In other words, that they are consolidated by nation and state building. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, I believe that when we interrogate democracy, as we do in this instance, we not only want to put the system in its parameters of logic, but we certainly want to attempt to understand its meaning in real terms. We want to understand democracy in bread and butter terms, we want to understand in terms of equality, in terms of equity, in terms of social justice, and so on and so forth. And that understanding helps us to navigate the real impact that democracy, its institutions, and the state that caters for that space to be executed impacts people's lives. Because the bread and butter issues, the issues of equality, of equity, of social justice, are the very things that define people who ostensibly live in democratic societies. He poses the question of whether our democracy is in a socialist tradition of popular power, where state of the interest of majority is protected at the expense of all other people, and it poses whether election of representatives or certain conditions of democratic rights, regular elections, freedom of speech, whether these are sufficient conditions for society to be labeled democratic. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, Namibia's democracy is rooted in the liberal tradition, given what our liberal constitution impels us to do and to be. Where the democratic system means an open election of representatives in certain conditions, such as democratic rights, including freedom of speech, conscience, and assembly, the separation of powers as hoped for but not real in Namibia, the rule of law as hoped for but not real in Namibia, and the supremacy of the constitution as hoped for in Namibia but does not in actual fact occur. In respect of regular elections, of course, many African countries have moved toward regular elections, hoping that the form of their democracy would convince the world that there is substantive democracy. And therefore, in Namibia, already from that very first point, whether we have a democracy that is representative in its nature and content, we fail the test that our democracy is one that is genuinely representative. If we just look at the elections and how these elections have been challenged regularly. Honourable Speaker, there are others that we claim because the court has not found the ECN in malfeasance in the electoral processes that therefore Namibia's elections were free and fair, just, acceptable, and were buttressed by an international community, including such countries like Zimbabwe, who confirmed that our elections were free and fair. Of course, the evidence is different. When, for instance, in planning for elections, in areas where the ruling party seems to be losing very profoundly support, individuals from certain regions are busting in order to re-engineer the political space of those areas. You wonder whether the outcome of such elections could really be considered free and fair. Honourable Speaker, you also want to question as part of the democratic process, whether in terms of the pre-election processes, whether the supreme power of ruling party and state in Africa allows any electioneering itself to be free and fair. So those are the points in limit, the points that we have to ask before we get to the real issue. Honorable Speaker, sir, we proceed and quickly go to the preamble of the Republic, which says in the Constitution that we make as a country a commitment to the inherent dignity and the equal and unalienable rights of all, emphasis, members of human family, as indispensable for freedom, justice, and peace. However, if we were really a democratic society, the all would not today mean the sum of us. In other words, the inherent dignity of some is promoted at the expense of all others. The inherent dignity of the elite is promoted at the expense of all others. The pursuit of happiness for the elite is promoted at the expense of the ordinary, poor, disenfranchised, rural, and poor urban Namibians. Yes. John Stuart Mills produced the first writings of development democracy in the 18th century, in which he describes the central value of a democracy as one that promotes the highest and harmonious development of individual capacities. In Africa, and certainly Namibia, the highest and harmonious development of individual capacities rests with the elite, their families, and the networks for which they occupy state positions. Honorable Speaker, consecutive Africa barometer surveys consistently found widespread acceptance of the Constitution of the Republic, with over 60% of respondents expressing support for its core values, such as the provision of free political activity, a free press, freedom of association, assembly, and therefore Namibians in essence value what the Constitution poses to be. However, when you go deeper and look at whether this country is a democracy or whether it is a majoritarianist system, you would, by virtue of the facts contained in the day-to-day evidence of our existence, concur that we're actually more an elite-captured majoritarianist state. For example, look at who is the Auditor General, who is the Prosecutor General, who is the Inspector General, who is the Chief of Army, who are those in parastatals, who are the ambassadors, who are all those individuals that are in the judiciary. And therefore, it would be correct to suggest, as I do in concurrence with the Honourable Member, that the independence of the judiciary is a far cry from the reality, when well-known party members of SWAPO, the ruling party, have been appointed as Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, Judge President, and all those other things that we know of. And therefore, such a system in which majoritarianism, or we could also call it ethno-nationalism, is the key defining feature of our daily existence, such a society cannot be defined as a democratic society. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, when we look quickly to transit to the question of development, we contend that precisely because we are not a democratic system of state, and therefore we are a defective democracy, at best a majoritarianist state, precisely because of that factor in which some ministries and offices and agencies are completely occupied by one or the other ethnic group, despite the claims of the Honourable Prime Minister that the system of appointment to civil society is actually transparent and done in an accountable way, despite her strong suggestion that the system produces good outcomes because the system is strong. We have, therefore, to conclude, precisely because we are not a democratic society, that we could not develop. And precisely we are not a democratic society, we could not build nation. And precisely because we are not a democratic society, we are also not a society that could engage in nation building, and therefore we are a country that will continue to be underdeveloped for as long as we know. And the evidence, again, is there. We have Namibians whose lives and livelihoods are severely constrained and threatened by protracted spoils of drought. Yesterday, I asked the question, What is government's intervention going to be in respect of the question of drought, where farmers are about to have their entire livelihood collapse? No answer was given by the Minister of Finance. There are Namibians in the rural agricultural sector who are about 70% of the populace. Their lives are supported by agriculture. A genuinely democratic government that would look at the lives and livelihoods of the people on the basis of the highest and most harmonious development of the most important individual development capacities, that government would have responded to this question of mine on the question of survival of the agricultural sector by immediately taking actions to correct the conditions in the farming sector. Honourable Speaker, we have tens of thousands of graduates who do not find jobs, the multitude of working folks who cannot buy houses, the thousands of school-going age young Namibians who fell out of the system at grade 10, the growing number of dysfunctional homes headed by single parents, grandparents and children. There are hordes of women who give birth in tents, hundreds of sick people who go to clinics and hospitals in areas such as ASAP Block and all over the country who cannot find medicine. Sanitation and safe water remain pipe dreams for the majority of Namibians. The list goes on and it even gets to become bleaker and bleaker. This, Honourable Speaker, occurs while Namibia is rated as the third wealthiest nation in Africa. I go to the fourth point, Honourable Speaker. Our government, since independence, has done extremely well, and I commend them for that, in terms of state building. Around the world, Namibia is recognized as one of the countries that does not fall behind in terms of creating the necessary institutions at state level to deal with a number of issues. If you look at ACC, we are on par with international standards. We have created an anti-corruption commission. We have an ombudsman's office. We have all international agreements that we enter into. We ratify the necessary laws to create the subsequent institutions that our international commitments permit us and expect from us to do. We are good at that. Then it ends there. When, for instance, as part of the state building process, a key institution such as the ECN is controlled by a ruling party group of functionaries, you begin to question the ultimate commitment to democracy in that key institution. Honourable Speaker, our government has done very well, as I said, in terms of state building. But it continues to engage in state building even at a time when you advise don't do that, even when that institution is not needed. During the State of the Nation and the budget address of the Honourable Shimi, I asked, please do not engage in creating another institution called the Namibia Revenue Agency. The numbers don't make sense. You are not going to increase to get greater tax collection than before. You are doing well as we speak. They went ahead, created an institution, and went back to what the Honourable Hage Geingob, as he was Prime Minister then, said. And I have his book, the PhD, State Formation in Namibia, Promoting Democracy and Good Governance, by Hage Gottfried Geingob, March 2014. On page 204, he says, amongst other things, he says, there are allegations made by some that only few are getting rich and the majority are left out. He says, questions are being asked if the government's policy to empower blacks or individuals, is it working? I skip, he says, there is some truth to the allegations in terms of the economic outlook. A new economic class is being created without any deep transformation of society. Those who have already been affirmed continue to be affirmed again and again. And then he goes on and says, within the civil service too, I concentrated on ensuring that its composition reflected the diversity of the population. He says this. However, as already pointed out of late, voices of favoring and nepotism are gaining ground. He says this in 2004 already. And the NRA is created, and somebody from some place at the Bank of Namibia is taken and placed there. Then on page 205 he says, and I will quote this wholeheartedly, And as it is written, lately accusations are serving that one ethnic group is being favored by the government. Paramount Chief Kwema Riwak of the Herald claimed, in the quotes, government and the semi-government agencies are dominated by Swartbooi and the Oshiwambo. He alleged that all the commanders of the NDA are Ovambo. Most of the ambassadors are Ovambo. Almost all parastatal companies are run by Ovambos. Ovambos get most government bursaries, loans for housing and new businesses, and land reform and resettlement projects. Such concerns, real and perceived, are beginning to undermine reconciliation. End of quote. I would say such concerns undermine democracy, development, and nation building. Honourable Speaker, I must round up. I thank you so much for your time.
Let's listen to each other.
Honourable Speaker, we have a ruling party in this country that consistently enjoyed the support of the majority of Namibians, including some of us who were bona fide members of Swartbooi Party. Swartbooi has been the dominant party for 3 decades and was, on account of liberation history, able to secure additional support and good faith from Namibians. Henning Melba, a member of Swartbooi for 46 years, says, amongst others, that there is wide acceptance of the party being the government and the government being the party. This notion, he says, blurs the boundaries of the state and society. He then says that the party-controlled state is the main employer in Namibia, 100,000 civil servants. The state is under the firm control of a government in which there is only one party with influence, thus political loyalty, and this is to debunk from their own member 46 years, evidence that their own member, unlike what the Prime Minister is denying, their own member says, this is, thus political loyalty to the discourse said by Swartbooi is internalized to a large degree as a means of survival. In other words, whether you're a judge, your conscience often, when it matters, does not guide you. And the evidence is there. When a Chief Justice finds out of legal reasoning correctly that the processes through which the ECN conducted elections are unconstitutional, he finds the legal, rational connection on the basis of the facts issued to him that the process was unconstitutional, but proceeds and says, nonetheless, please go ahead, inaugurate the president. That tells you that here is a man whose conscience tells him, do what is right legally and find the process unconstitutional. Then something reminds him and says, oh, hold on. Where will my butter and bread come from? And he says, hold on, let me have the president inaugurated, even when it's unconstitutional. That is what Melba says. Civil servants are dependent on the state, which is run and owned by the party. The party is perceived to be the decisive factor behind the state as an employer that provides one job and secures one's income. Almost all officials who decide on recruitment for high-ranking positions have strong party loyalties, thus publicly articulating deviating views and privately speaking the truth that hurts them. That is why an in-law of the Right Honourable Prime Minister, who would receive over $6 billion in state tenders, and it would be okay, that they would keep on receiving such type of tenders, even when other Namibians are much more competitive. I want to, Honourable Speaker, as a roundup, as an internationalist, debunk, Utoni, you want to start? You want to start? Hey, you want to start? You want to start? You want to start?
Baby dog, sit down.
You want to start? You want to start?
No.
You want to start? You want to start?
You want to start?
You want to start? You are a tribalist. You are a tribal party. You and your father are tribalists. You are dogs that don't deserve. You are a fool. You are a secret. You are the one that wanted to You are nothing. You are a tribalist. You don't know what nation you have no capacity to even represent yourself. You have no stream of ideology or any sort of definition. You are nobody. You are nothing worthy to be spoken over. You are a tribalist. You and your father are the people, the few people in Lubango. You are nobody. Your father has failed. Such is you. And it's not you are nothing. You are a tribalist. You are the one giving strength to people that don't even come from our regions. You are the one that wanted to lease land and private projects. You are the one that wanted to sell funds of the government. You are the one that is intended because you don't qualify to work in government. You are there is nothing that you can offer this country. You are an empty bottle, and that's why you continue to eat yourself to death. Look at how you live.
Honorable Swartbooi!
There is nothing.
Honorable Swartbooi! Honorable Swartbooi! Honorable Swartbooi! Honorable Swartbooi! Honorable Swartbooi! Order! Close the mic! Close the mic! Honorable Swartbooi! Honorable members! Honorable members! Order! 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 Let me tell you, there is no need for honorable members, please. Honorable member, sit. I'm coming to that. Honorable member. Honorable member, please sit down. Please sit down. Honorable member, please sit down. Honorable member, honorable member, please sit down. Honorable member, let's have order. Let's have order. Honorable, let's have order. Order. Let's have order. Order. Listen to me. Order, honorable members, let's have order, let's have order, please, order. Listen, we can all be talking at the same time. Order. Order. Let me say this. Honorable members, you are entitled to make your intervention. If a member calls for a point of order, that point of order must be heard. Now, either Honorable Noyoma or Honorable Nikano, one of them, you were standing up on a point of order. And I was drawing your attention, Honorable Swartbooi, to that point of order. All what we need to... Wait, please. Order. All what... We are big enough to contain ourselves. That is the approach that I'm insisting on you. Now, Honorable Swartbooi, you have not yet concluded. There was a point of order, and I want to hear that point of order. Honorable Nikano, you wanted to speak on a point of order? Yes? Okay. Can you wait for your mic?
Yes, Honorable Speaker, honorable members. I wanted to raise a point of order on rule number 115. When there is a grave disturbance, in this August House, and it has become a norm in this very August House where honorable members have the audacity to attack some of the honorable members, particularly when they are members of Swartbooi Party. It is becoming a norm and insult. And some of us, some of us as members of Parliament as well in this August House, we cannot sit and witness an August House being generated by some members of this August House.
Order. No,
Members
please,
cannot be
let her have a
insulted by
say.
other members.
Let her
And I
finish.
want to say that those who think they can sit here and attack other members,
Thank you.
the public out there in the
Thank you.
Namibian nation
Thank
is
you.
not happy with what is happening here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, thank you. Now, Honorable Swartbooi, please confine yourself to your intervention. Please, let us listen to each other, please. Please continue your intervention, conclude. And I want you to keep it as calm as necessary. This is what is needed. There's no need for drama. We don't need it. Let's please make your intervention, conclude, and let's continue, finalize this particular topic. Please continue. Let's have the mic. Please. Let's have order. Let's listen to each other now. We don't need to get at each other. Let us calm down and make constructive intervention. That's all what is needed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir. Honorable Speaker, it would be important, while we respect you, that you also show even-handedness. When the other member stood up, he didn't even stand up on a point of order. He stood up to shout an allegation. That is where the problem started. But I respect it.
Let's leave it there. Order, please. It's fine. Let's listen to each other. Please, listen.
Yes. So, Honorable Speaker, I would advise many Namibians to actually acquaint themselves with what is contained here by the Honorable Dr. Keinkop, as he then was Prime Minister, now President, that many Namibians would see the state formation and all other issues that he's arguing here. Very, very enriching indeed, and very educating to many to read in terms of nation building, but also in these types of debates to openly speak about the issues that concern us, and not to shout and scream things and labels to others and then outside be quiet about it, because we are very capable of doing exactly what we are doing outside as well. Now, Honorable Speaker, my last point is that precisely as the apartheid national party was controlling many Namibians with resources, as South Africa and here in Namibia, as apartheid was controlling people with resources to maintain an artificial legitimacy and a hegemony. That hegemony was able to be debunked and removed, because there is only so long that a person can continue to live in fear. There is only so long a period when a person will allow him or herself to be ruled by dictators who do not want to listen to the interests of the people. And what has happened, and this is my last point, is once the people stopped fearing the rulers, as is the case in Namibia, they were able to remove them by hook or by crook, as will happen here. When the Nationalist Party left government. They completely disintegrated, just like UNIP in Zambia. That is what I foresee will happen with the current ruling elite that are neither democratic nor oriented toward development, do not have the experience to pull people out of poverty, and have built a massive experience of how to loot, how to steal, and how to cover up. This fish rod story would long have been dead had an international approach not been alive to it. If that whistleblower was not who he was from another country, this thing would already have been dead, as are the cases of many. And therefore, I support the motion of the honorable member, and I urge us all to work for a democratic Namibia, not a tribal Namibia, and to be genuinely internationalists, unlike those who claim to be nationalists, but in their actions are actually the deepest tribalists this country has ever seen. Their days are numbered. Their lives will be remembered as horrible, sad, and foolish lives. Okay. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's move. Let's make progress. Let's make progress. Minister of Justice.